Tabloid newspaper, Chris Wilkinson. So, the first story is Hollywood star Liam Neeson sparked an outcry by telling of how he went out looking for a black B star D, so discernibly that's bastard, to kill after someone close to him was raped.
I think what this story shows is that how people are professionally is very different to how they are personally, and I think he's just revealed himself to be a really nasty person.
Well, he explains that it was when he was younger and that he did regret what he was doing as he was doing it, but just like me, I'm sure I'm not too convinced by that.
No, I mean, if he's an actor, obviously he's very good at pretending to be something that he isn't, and
he was using a real life scenario to draw on in order to influence his character.
So he's a method actor in that sense.
I suppose so.
Well, I kind of think there's a line to be drawn if you are doing method acting, and if, for example, you are playing a murderer or something, you won't actually go out and murder someone. Obviously that's illegal, and the consequences of murdering someone are a lot worse than just pretending.
If he actually found the guy who did the rape, would he be justified in beating up with the pole that he had on him?
I don't think you should add insult to injury in that sense. I think if one thing is bad enough, you shouldn't then try and add additional bad things onto it as well by committing assault.
Okay, right. So we're going to go to page 3 now. There isn't a model on there. Mayo blames BBC bosses. Simon Mayo thinks BBC bosses pushed Radio 2 into pairing him with Joe Wiley to get more women on air.
Well, this is obviously it's about the BBC. They have an equality and diversity strategy that runs from 2016 to 2020. It essentially means that regardless of someone's merit or skill, the BBC now have to employ 50% men and 50% women. They have quotas for ethnic minorities and sexuality minorities.
But Joe Wiley's actually quite a good DJ.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying. Like, the system has been changed essentially to favour equality and diversity as opposed to actual merit. So this is just the BBC showing themselves up to be really grubby, fraudulent people, about as fraudulent as the television detection equipment that they have in their bogus television detector vans.
Hillsborough trial told too few turnstiles. So a structural engineer has decided that the main reason for the tragedy at Hillsborough was because there weren't enough turnstiles.
Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the fact is there was an inquiry and everything into the Hillsborough disaster, and it was quite conclusive that the police were to blame.
What about all the fans?
Well, yeah, but obviously if they are excitable, going to a stadium to watch a match.
What if they didn't have tickets?
Yeah, but hold on, let's assume that they did have tickets, because I think most of them probably did have tickets.
Well, the ones that died did, yeah. They were in there first.
Well, I'm pretty sure you can't prove one way or another whether they had tickets. The point is that they were let in too fast and
at such a high rate that it wouldn't have made a difference.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And obviously that's what led to the disaster, what led to the crush, and it wasn't properly regulated. I somehow think that turnstiles would have made little difference, because it's not so much the rate at which people were coming in, it was the fact that they were all in the same place, and therefore the crush happened because they were all in a confined environment.
33 men held for child sex exploitation. Police investigating child exploitation have arrested 33 men. The men aged between 30 and 40 were held after a woman made complaints about sexual abuse between 2002 and 2005. The arrests were made in Calderdale, West Yorkshire. Where have we heard that before, Chris?
Well, we've heard Rotherham Council or whatever it was. You remember the story about
Yes.
Rotherham Council? Yeah. And this is Yorkshire, so it's still the north.
Do you think there's a connection?
I think there possibly is a connection. Maybe. I mean, I'm not an investigator.
What sort of connection?
Well, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? And I think that perhaps...
Same sort of what?
Well, can I actually have a look at the story?
You had time to proofread it before we started.
I didn't. I just came here and you started recording it.
So what's the connection?
So the connection probably is...
It's mass rape in Yorkshire. What's the connection?
Well, this says Bradford as well, so I kind of... So I kind of think that
Where are you going with this?
a certain group of people are possibly to blame for this.
Is it the Irish?
It's not the Irish, no. I think with all of these things, any investigation that occurs tends to be smothered, and the real sort of the gangs and everything, grooming gangs and things like that, and the people who do these sorts of things are not properly prosecuted. I think
Who? Aren't properly prosecuted.
the gangs.
I dragged it out of you before. I'll drag it out of you again. Who is it?
It's the gangs.
Right, I want to make an abstract point, because on the last story, adjacent to the Liam Neeson story, is a story that sort of fits in with that and fits in with the Liam Neeson story. I want you to join the dots, I suppose. The scale of knife crime sweeping Britain was laid brutally bare when police found a boy, just 14, carrying these 5 deadly knives.
There's no indication that
And his name was Shamar.
Yeah, but the point is that they're not. There's a difference between actually possessing something and having an intent to wound.
Shamar Dawes Ephraim Idris.
Yeah, well, just because they're carrying sort of dangerous knives does not necessarily
Anton Moore. Ishak Ibdili.
Does not necessarily mean that that these people want to kill anyone. I mean, people do have knives as sort of collector's items and valuables.
Were they going fishing? Are you saying they were going fishing?
Well,
Were they Boy Scouts?
They're not collector's knives. Look at the fucking blades.
Well, I don't think you're a knife collecting expert.
The law says that any blade smaller than 3 inches is legal to carry in the UK. Any blade longer than 3 inches has to have a very valid excuse. I think if you know by the
that's a recent law as well.
I don't think so.
I distinctly remember that the law was changed a couple of years ago.
Also, now you're an expert in the law, but before you weren't an expert in the law.
Well, no, that
Which
was
one is
was
it?
a reference to Damien and the fact that he just dives headlong into a story with that.
That is also true. The
context.
the editor Damien Smith is a fanatic.
Of what?
Well,
I wasn't even listening. I wasn't even listening.
don't point it at me.
What did he accuse me of?
Being a fanatic.
Fanatic about what?
I don't know. He didn't say.
We can fuck off then. So the next story. American Nazis who worship Britain's Tommy Robinson, his real name Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Let's call eggs. The NSM chief on whites only bid. Now, it does not explain what that means at all. But it says amid the snow-capped mountains and freezing temperatures of Pennsylvania, the tiny town of Elysis is America's hotbed of far-right extremism. Daniel Burnside claims 1.5 million Brits tune into the warped views of NSM, so I'm guessing that's a pun on mainstream media, and this will be national, something like that. And they were involved in the Charlottesville race riots of 2017.
I think this story. I mean, it uses very great figurative language. It juxtaposes a cold environment.
Chris, his dog is named after Adolf Hitler.
I think this is a sort of an extrapolation of the truth. I think that this is not a generalised pattern of behaviour. Tommy Robinson is someone who has very sort of selective political interests. They're not very general. As such, he can't be taken seriously across a number of key issues in politics. For example, you couldn't trust Tommy Robinson to run an education policy because he doesn't know anything about it. I think, it's just attempting. I mean, this is coming from the Mirror as well. This is attempting to counterbalance some of the more right-wing elements in newspapers such as...
Well, it would seem that the Mirror is obsessed with right-wing figures, because on the next page...
It seems like a token story to me.
Well, Nigel Farage and his mum, who looks like that woman that used to be in Coronation Street, I can't remember her name. They say a week is a long time in politics, so maybe his many years in the game explain Nigel Farage looking older than his mum. So they've had a go. UKIP leader 54 was joined by Barbara Stevens, 78, at the Orchard Theatre in Dartford, Kent, for his one-man show. He is described as an entertaining evening with Nigel Farage as a night of anecdotes, light-hearted debate, and a little bit of politics.
I mean, is there really a story in that? I don't think there is. Again, this is just tokenism from the Daily Mail. From the Daily Mirror, rather. Just trying to... I mean, they've got no real stories in this edition, have they?
Well, the element of this show is that you talk long enough for me to find the right page, and you've stopped talking about the story.
Well, I mean, Nigel Farage...
Idiot.
I'm glad he wants to try and get back into frontline politics, because Brexit has been handled shambolically. Frankly, it's wrong also that Tommy Robinson's been admitted to UKIP, I think, for his sectional views and things like that. I think, if anything, Nigel Farage should join the Libertarian Party, because that's what I'm a member of, and it would seem like it fits in with him.
I want to change the tone, because it's been a bit heavy this week. So we're going to the health section of the paper. Now this caught my eye because it's incredibly strange. So this is the idea of sort of swapping regular habits and customs for an alternate way. Now, when I first read this, I thought I'd misread it, but apparently I haven't, because the normal habit comes first, okay, and then the alternate is the second option. Squatting over public loo seats to sitting down.
Well, I would agree with that, because obviously...
But it's trying to suggest that squatting is the norm.
It probably is, because of how...
it is. In France, there's many airs which are basically roadside toilets, gas stations, and, garden bits where you can sit down and have some food. A lot of those... toilets don't actually have toilet bowls. They just have a hole in the ground. I know it seems very medieval, but sometimes you really don't want to touch anything with your bare ass. Would you use one of these holes in the ground, Chris Wilkerson?
No, because I don't think it's hygienic, to be perfectly honest.
What if it's your only option?
I'd rather go to the toilet somewhere else at home, maybe.
What if you're in the desert?
Or travelling through the south of France?
So you're equating the south...
Which Ben has never done.
Equating the south of France with a desert.
I didn't say that, did I?
Well, you said almost... They're almost the same thing. So...
They're almost...
That's pretty much what you said. So, I would hold it in if I had to deal with it.
But for how long, though?
Well, it depends.
How long can you hold a shit in your arse for?
I haven't personally measured how long.
What's the longest time you have had to do it?
It's probably about 5 or 6 hours.
So, if you're in a...
Sorry. So, Next week we will go to the doctors, and can we ask them what's a safe time, and also can we, with your permission, get you a colonoscopy?
I mean, you can arrange that, but I won't be able to.
You have to commit to it. You have to commit to it. You have to commit to it now, because the six listeners we have will want to hear this.
Yeah, and one of them's me. Really, I mean, that's not really going to benefit me at all.
It will. It'll make sure that you are not backed up.
I'm not backed up currently.
How do you know that? How do you know?
Well, because surely, like, there'd be a pressure or something, or
6 hours is a long time to hold a shit in.
Yeah, well, that was a while ago. That was
a stool.
Yeah, that was about 5 or 6 years ago.
But if you're in a remote part of the world which doesn't have easy access to a toilet, and you can't just get on a plane and have a shit,
right? But yeah,
do you shit in a dirty hole, or do you dig your own hole?
Well, the example that you gave was a desert. You'd have to dig your own hole, because I'm pretty sure that in the desert they don't have toilets.
Well, there'll be a city adjacent to the desert, next to the desert.
I would probably dig my own hole.
Downstream?
In a desert?
It depends how vengeful I was feeling.
So there is an element of creativity to this that you would put into.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're having a...
Would you put a flag in the turd after?
No, but you could mark it. Yeah, you put a label on it.
Why?
Well, just so that people know that it's there. I mean, you don't want to be discourteous to future people going by, essentially undisturbed wilderness, and then just finding excrement on the floor, unmarked. Well, yeah, okay, go on.
And the final story is, when I can finally get the page, is Doctor Who could have been a sister act years ago if Whoopi Goldberg had her way. So this is a story about how Whoopi Goldberg once wanted to be Doctor Who, and she claims herself that she was instrumental in getting Jodie Whittaker the role.
I doubt that, personally, again, because of the BBC's equality and diversity strategy. They were bound. There was a Sydney Morning Herald article that I saw the day after it was announced that Jodie Whittaker was the new Doctor, where Chris Chibnall, the showrunner, essentially confirmed that they only auditioned female actors for the role, and therefore, regardless of what happened, they would have always...
So are you saying Whoopi Goldberg is lying?
Whoopi Goldberg is definitely lying in this instance.
Well, she could have been in some sort of agent role.
Yeah, but she's got no sort of connection to...
Chris Wilkinson.
She's got no connection to anyone on the production team of Doctor Who. And as far as...
How do you know that? Full of shit.
Well, because in the surrounding media and the press releases, it would have been made obvious.
Whoopi did do a podcast with the 10th Doctor, David Tennant, which is out today. So technically...
So the only link is the tenuous link is because David Tennant did Broadchurch, who was written by Chris Chibnall, who cast Jodie Whittaker. That's a third generation link.
Whoopi did a podcast with David Tennant.
As a final comment on tenuous links, are you not going to make the connection between the tenuous links that I directed for you earlier in this paper?
I think there could possibly be a link between them.
That concludes the third and worst episode.